So, Christian Mann, you are clearly a veteran, a pioneer, and an eminent name when it comes to the adult film industry. But for the general audience, could you tell us a little bit about who you are, how you got started, and how you rose to your current success?
Did you just say that I'm old?
No.
The answer, by the way, the answer to your question is that I started in the adult entertainment industry in 1979. So 33 years ago. I'm 52 years old. I am a second generation member of the industry. My father started printing adult magazines in 1964. I wasn't raised by my father, but I did go and work for him. After my first year in college, I was on break for summer and I needed a job because not only was school out, but my job, which was tutoring, was also on hiatus, and what started as a summer job turned into a now 33-year career.
Wow. Okay.
So the short story is that I worked for my father's mail order company and magazine printing company for 5 years and left his employ in 1983, so a little 4.5 years later, and went to work for Catalina Video for a guy named William Higgins, who was a well-respected gay adult filmmaker. And I eventually became the president of Catalina Video. I was the personally heterosexual president of at the time, the largest, most influential gay studio in the adult business. And I did that until I did that for 6 years, and in 1989 I went to work for a company called CPLC Video Team, and I was indicted about a year after working there on an obscenity charge. So that's when I made my bones in the obscenity defense side of things. And some 4 years later, I bought that company, a company called Video Team. I bought it in 1994, and I owned it until I sold it in 2006. And I worked for the people who I sold the company to for 2 years, 2008. And then I was between opportunities. I was semi-retired. I was doing a little consulting business when I received a phone call from John Stagliano, who owns Evil Angel. And he, that summer, himself had been indicted on an obscenity count. And maybe knowing a little bit about my experience with that, and recognizing that he had a need for a general manager as the one that he had before he'd left, he offered me a job. And I have to tell you, he is the only guy from whom I would have accepted a job offer at that point in my life. I was back to being self-employed. I had worked for myself for 12 years, had a 2-year stint in between working for somebody else, and I thought, that's it, I'm never working for somebody else again. I really, I have such horrible control issues, I need to work for myself. But when John Stagliano reached out, I knew it was an opportunity I wanted to take, simply because he singularly, I shouldn't say he singularly commanded that kind of respect from me. There are several people in our industry who I respect and admire, but he's the one guy who commanded that respect and who had a working style that I knew I could fit in. It was a dream opportunity. I wasn't expecting it. It came from left field, and that was 4 years ago, and I've been having a terrific experience ever since. I've been having a really good time, and that's what I do.
Well, throughout the terrific experiences that I'm sure you've encountered in this long time spent within the industry, I'm sure as no stranger to the challenges inherent in the adult industry, what were some of the most difficult times that you feel the industry has faced, if you could reflect back on your 33 years?
You might end up editing it. You took that sentence right off of my bio. I wrote that. You actually are reading a sentence that I wrote for my own bio. How shameless and embarrassing for me. It's. I'm sorry for laughing. You're gonna have to ask me the question again, which was about. I mean, where we're going with the question was that in the time in the industry.
The industry has obviously faced a lot of difficult times.
Yeah, right.
And so reflecting back on your 33 years, what are some of those moments or those incidents that you can...
Yeah, that's a good question, in my opinion, because people tend to think, oh, this is the most challenging time this industry has ever faced. And historically, probably cultures, civilizations think, oh, this is the most challenging time on earth. You know, the World War II generation, you know, the greatest generation. Nobody ever had to go through what they... And the fact is, it's been challenging from day one. Within a year of working for my father's company in 1979, actually, I think really within months, there were legal challenges. There were indictments in a big operation called MyPorn and Postporn, and there was a legal environment. The obscenity thing, the First Amendment issues were alive and well then. So there were some legal challenges. At the same time, there was this migration from adult content being served in magazines and 8mm films to the beginning of the video cassette revolution. And with that, people who were entrenched in certain kinds of distribution, theatrical releases, big films, that kind of thing, suddenly found themselves facing economic challenges, market challenges, business challenges that they didn't see coming. And they either had to adapt, they either had to grow or go. Just a couple of years after the video cassette revolution, the video camera revolution came along, and suddenly, instead of having to shoot everything on film, 16mm film or 32mm film, suddenly it was anybody could get a much cheaper, easier to hold video camera, and the cost of making a movie was suddenly cut in a third, which one would think would be a good thing. But the competition accordingly increased 10 times. All of a sudden, everybody wanted to be in the business. The loosening of standards or mores, you know, that used to be, oh my God, that person's a pornographer. Holy cow, you know, they must be in the mafia. They must be a horrible criminal. All of a sudden, in the early 1980s, it went from being a source of shame and derision to, hey, what a cool thing to do. I'm into it. I want it. So there's a new batch of competition that people didn't see coming, and a new breed, a new crop of guys were in charge until what? Until the internet came along. So I've seen marketing challenges, business challenges. Every 3-4 years, it seems like whoever's on top is about to be toppled by the new kids on the block who have figured out some new way to deliver the content. It's the same thing. It's still sex, but the way you're getting it there, from the old days of stag films and theatrical releases, all the way through the magazines, the video revolution, the movies, the internet. Now broadband internet, and every year I hear people say, oh, this might be it, this might be the last year of the industry, this business is going to pop. And the advantage I have with longevity, with long tenure, is that I can pull back and not get fazed by that kind of talk, because I've heard it before. And the thing that, the analogy that I use a lot, I always say that when my father was born in Austria in 1921, they were delivering milk to his house with a horse and buggy. When my sons were born in the 1980s, milk was being delivered to supermarkets on jets. So the delivery had changed, the business had changed. What had not changed is that children drink milk. What has not changed from the earliest stag films of the 1930s and 40s to now is that people want to watch sexually explicit content. I think about evolution. Charles Darwin was right. He said that the species that survive are not the smartest. It's not the most intelligent species that will survive. That's not what guarantees survival. And they're not the strongest. It's the ones most adaptable to change. What I realized as a member of the board of directors of the Free Speech Coalition was that AIM, which provided a good service, had these two problems: the confidentiality of performers' names as they are associated to their legal names, and the challenge of giving people the information that they need to safely shoot a performer without without getting into a HIPAA rights violation. And I sat down with a couple of people that I respect. Peter Ackworth from Kink, who is a good guy and who runs a very successful sex website, and who knows how to program things. And one of the lawyers from the Free Speech Coalition, the board chair, a lawyer named Jeff Douglas, and a couple of other people, and we put our heads together and said, what can we do to provide something so that the industry can go back to shooting with this kind of information, with this kind of protection, without those two things? What can we do but to make it secure and to make it not vulnerable to the HIPAA issue? And I got to tell you, I'm so proud of the work we did, because we came up with some. One of the things we realized is we don't want to be in possession of anybody's medical records. We, meaning the Free Speech Coalition and its subsidiary APHSS, which hopefully will change its initials soon. All we want to be able to do is be a resource of information to studios and directors that this person is available to work. And we realized that this is where a syllogism comes into play. A syllogism is a piece of logic that would say, I, Christian Mann, know how to swim. I swim. Fish swim. Therefore, Christian Mann is a fish. Well, you can see where that's bad logic. And what we realized is that having a system that logically said, this performer is available, doesn't violate a HIPAA right, and at the same time, the absence of a person in the system doesn't necessarily mean that they tested positive for an STD, which would be a medical confidentiality issue. It simply means they're not in the system. It might mean that they chose not to test at all that month. It might mean they chose to take 3 months off for vacation. One cannot infer that the absence of a performer in the APHSS system indicates that that performer has contracted a sexually transmitted disease. The only thing one can infer from that performer's name being in the APHSS system is that they are available to work. The other thing that's so beautiful is that the data is given to the APHSS system directly by the lab, which legally is maintaining their medical documents. We are not in possession of anybody's health tests. I don't have a copy of a lab's diagnostic test that says HIV negative, et cetera, et cetera. All I have is a transmission from a lab to our system that says this person's available to work for 28 days. And the third component, which is something that we hadn't figured out what to do about earlier, is that it makes it not possible for a performer or a director or some studio with an agenda to falsify a document. There was a case recently about a performer falsifying a document and removing data that said that this performer had contracted syphilis. Very serious. The APHSS system is immune to that, no pun intended, because the performer does not have the ability to transmit the data to APHSS and falsify, say that this performer is available to work. Only the lab can. The lab would not have altered a test. The performer could. So it provided an extra guarantee that even when performers were running around with a piece of paper saying, here's my test, look, you can inspect it, or on a cell phone, look, here's a copy of my test that I got from the website, and maybe I'm hiding, or it took away the caprice possibility, the capriciousness of somebody who would falsify this. So it cured two ills that we sought to cure, and in so doing cured a third one that needed to be cured that we weren't really thinking about at the time that we were creating this. And so now that we have the main labs, and most importantly, the main medical providers working with labs in the system, performers are not only being entered into the system with their availability data, but in the event that a performer is in fact has contracted even the more common and not as severe sexually transmitted diseases like chlamydia or gonorrhea. And I'm not making light about chlamydia or gonorrhea, but I'm just saying it's very different than syphilis or certainly than HIV. The protocol of the APHSS system mandates that the doctor who transmitted that data, a lab can only transmit the data as the designated transmitter of a doctor. It still involves a doctor. That doctor has an obligation to counsel that patient and to help create the genealogy that would be required so that the people that patient has had relations with would be notified correctly and promptly by a medical provider who adheres to confidentiality and privacy while still making sure that everybody that needs to be notified that they've been exposed to something is notified. And it is a function that the County of Los Angeles also does, but nowhere near as effectively, because the County of Los Angeles sends out an inspector. It takes that from the time that a lab by law notifies them that this person has a particular STI. They don't know where to go. They don't know who to ask for. They don't know the difference between real names, performer names. They don't have the resources, and they don't have the confidence of the people they're questioning to create an accurate genealogy. The APHSS system does. It's working with our doctors who know about the difference between performers in the community people in the performer community as opposed to civilians who would happen to contract an STD. It's a thing of beauty, and I'm proud of it. And it's a resource that we're providing, and I feel good about it because we're making it possible for people to be tested, to work with others reliably who have been tested, and to know that they can do so without a concern that a person is falsifying a test that they're performing with, and without a concern that their data, that their private information is going to be compromised. We did it. It's something that we couldn't have done 10 years ago when I was mandating that my productions had to be condom positive. We've gotten safer. Our performers are having safer sex. The definition of what is safer sex and the components that go into making safer sex, there's a lot of variation there in what that is. But a condom by itself is not safer sex. Condoms don't necessarily protect from certain STDs, and by themselves they don't involve the human component of respect and prudence and interaction and communication. I take a medication because I have ADD. But what I learned is that that medicine alone doesn't cure my ADD. It only makes it possible for me to take in the behavioral therapy that I need to do to deal with my ADD. The same thing is true here. A condom by itself is not safe for sex. Safe for sex is a lot more complicated, and it involves many components. And as an industry, we've done a great job of making it as safe as possible. And our record for performer safety and health is exemplary. And I sleep well at night.
Okay.
Cut.